The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back, in case you're wondering, with George Case. I'm Ralph Tyko of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and on Sundays we talk a little ball. And to introduce the panel, it is the usual folks that love to do this. George, who's here today?
Okay, thank you, Ralph. I'm happy to introduce our panel today, which is David Hubler. David wrote the book, hi, David, Nats and the Grays, all about Washington, D.C. baseball during the World War II era. My old Sabre companion, Alan Blumkin. And Alan, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon,
everybody. Good to hear from you. And we have a honored member of our panel today, Ronnie Rabinovitz, and I wanted to congratulate Ronnie on last night's effort by the Dodgers. And I thought we could talk a little bit about the upcoming World Series, but before that, we can talk about what's happened with the Dodgers. And Ronnie, again, our congratulations to you, and give us your take on that series against the Brewers.
Well, it was a tough series. It was wonderful. Thank you, George. I appreciate it, really. It was a very tough series. Milwaukee has a very good team. And after we lost Game 6, I was a little nervous that we wouldn't pull out on Game 7. But they really came through. And congratulate the Milwaukee Brewers on a great season. They were terrific. Now we have to face Boston. And that's a very interesting thing because, as I pointed out on my Facebook page, it would be the first team that integrated baseball versus the last team that integrated baseball, which is really interesting. When you realize Jackie Robinson came in 1947, the Boston Red Sox didn't integrate baseball until 1959, 12 years later. They were the last team. Kind of interesting. I just got a note from Eric Davis. Remember Eric Davis? He used to play for Cincinnati. He was with the Dodgers, too. Yeah, and he sent me a note. Right, exactly. He sent me a note, and he said, I hated playing in Boston. They were the worst fans, bigoted racial slurs all the time. It was terrible. So he sent me a note this morning, as a matter of fact. So he says, go Dodgers.
Hey, Ronnie, put your producing hat on and get Eric Davis as a guest.
I will.
All right.
I'll get him.
Sounds good.
Absolutely.
Yes, go Dodgers. Even as an old Giant fan, I have always been a National League guy. Hard to determine who's in the National League and who's in the American League anymore. But I'm pulling for him. It's not easy for a Giant fan to see that.
I know it isn't.
Well, I have no trouble pulling for them because I don't want the Red Sox of all teams to win. But I wanted to follow up with Ronnie with another quick anecdote that the Red Sox actually gave Jackie Robinson a quote-unquote tryout.
Yes, they did.
They paid no attention to him. He came with two other Negro League ball players, and they paid no attention to them. It was done just politically to appease a couple of folks.
He didn't want anything to do with that.
Oh, no.
He was the last one.
Yes, absolutely.
Pumpsy Green.
Absolutely. So, had the Red Sox not been such racists, or at least, well, they were, the front office, they might have had Jackie Robinson.
Right.
They might have had Willie Mays.
They were just doing that. Yeah. They were just doing that for a show. They weren't planning to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Willie Mays. Did he have a tryout with the Red Sox, too?
No, but they knew about him.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they had a farm team with the Birmingham Barons and the racially segregated Southern Association.
Yeah.
And they knew about Willie Mays, and they refused. The
the racism of the Red Sox back in those days was institutional. Because of Yorkie, who I've been screaming about for years, is how is he in Cooperstown, in the Hall of Fame.
Exactly.
And the answer I get most of the time is he bought his way in.
Could be. He was a big racist. He always was.
And they had Cronin. Eddie Collins was the GM, and Joe Cronin was the manager.
Yeah.
And then Cronin, when Eddie Collins died, Cronin went up to be the GM.
That's a hell of a long time. 12 years before they integrated. From 47 to 59. It's
there's a book out that I recommend. It has Eisenhower on the cover. It's the integration of the major leagues team by team. And they go in the order that they integrate. Of course, Brooklyn was first and the Red Sox were last. But it goes very deeply into the detail of, each franchise's, policy during those years.
The Yankees weren't that
no.
They were late too, weren't they?
Yeah, very, because George Weiss.
Yeah.
And they had a traveling secretary who was a diehard Southerner, and Weiss was afraid that he brought in a black player that the fans from Westchester wouldn't go with. And of course, and when they traded Vic Power to the A's after 1953, they asked him about that and said Power was a showboat, and he went out with light-skinned women and all the rest of it. So they shipped him to the A's. Yeah. And then when Elson Howard came up, Elson Howard basically kept quiet and took whatever abuse came out over those years.
He was the first one, wasn't he?
First one, right?
Yes. Right, yeah.
Hey, Al, let me add another book to your excellent bibliography. Mine that I like is Crossing the Line.
I have that, yeah.
Yeah, it's by Larry Maffei.
Yeah, I have that book, yeah.
Broadstead, and it's subtitled Black Major Leaguers, 1947 to 1959, and they give short biographies of everyone that came up in the order that they came up. But what impresses me about this book is that there are literally no mistakes that I'm always combing books for,
facts. I read them very critically also.
Yeah, and
I'm always looking for, something comes up in a book that I feel is not right. It detracts from the, it detracts from the book itself. I'll give a break on numbers because numbers can be typos, but statements are another story altogether.
Yeah, I would put notes in the margins of books that I read correctly.
Uh-huh. And then return them to the library?
Well, no, I do.
Kidding.
I make it a practice never to
But
read.
the thing is, another thing they did...
if I like them enough to take them out, I'm going to keep them.
A lot of the owners did in those days is when they signed black players, they would send them to the Southern Association, the South Atlantic League, and
the worst league,
and hope they would quit. Like Frank Robinson.
Really?
Kurt Flood spent 2 years at Columbia, South Carolina, which I'm sure really helped his, attitude towards...
They welcomed him in with all open arms, right?
Yeah, right.
There's a high school in
Open
Oakland,
firearms.
California.
Yeah, the blacks who were born in the South had a better adjustment than the blacks that were born in the North or the West and had to deal with this for the first time, like Robinson.
Yeah, I was going to
tell
say
you a
there's a
story.
high school called McClymonds in Oakland, California, about, I'd say 10 miles from where I live in Alameda. And McClymonds at one time had Frank Robinson, Kurt Flood, and Veda Pinson on their varsity at the same time.
Yeah, some basketball player named Bill Russell came out of there also.
Absolutely.
Never heard of him.
But my point was that the American Legion coach from McClymonds, I can't think of his name right now. I'm slighting him because he developed a lot of these players. was also a scout for the Reds, and he ended up signing. I don't know if Kurt Flood was signed.
He came up with the Reds. He was traded to the Cardinals because he's blocked by Penson.
Okay, well
yeah.
then that rings true. These guys would all sign with the Reds, and the experiences that they went through in the minor leagues was absolutely brutal. I know Jackie, and Ronnie is here. Ronnie's a friend, and of course Jackie crossed the line first and this, that, and the other thing. But in a way, because he only played in the minor leagues in Montreal, and not that playing in the majors with Philadelphia and St. Louis in there was all that much of a thrill for him. But these guys that came up later, like Aaron and in these little shit towns in the South, where they got much more of it than Jackie in some ways.
Yes, they did.
Different, yet these guys need to kudos too, as well as the Spanish play, the Dominicans,
Latin.
Puerto Ricans,
Cubans.
This is one screwed up world in terms of diversity and acceptance. But I looked up at
I'll tell you a story. My dad. Oh, go ahead, Ralph. I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt.
No, I was just going to say it is encouraging that both World Series teams have an awful lot of Latins and players from all over the world. So maybe things are progressing a little bit.
I hope.
Sad that there are so few African Americans playing in the big leagues.
It's very sad.
These days.
Very sad.
But
I wanted to tell you a story.
Please.
My father was a Democratic National Committeeman for the state of Wisconsin. So he was one of the national committeemen that was selected to go tour the cities that they're trying to get the convention in 1964. And they went to all these cities, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, all over the country, Dallas and Miami. They were all trying, wooing to get that convention.
Mm-hmm.
So they finally selected Miami. And my dad said, wait a minute. He says, the national conventions are like a family affair in the summer. The families travel with the delegates. It's a big thing for them to see. And what's going to happen in the South when you have African Americans that are going to be coming from Texas or from Arizona or from California, traveling across the South to get to Miami, what's going to happen to them about their accommodations and sleeping in hotels and whatever. So they called George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, and they said, what do you think? And he said, I have no objection if they want to fly over my state. Do you know that Miami lost the convention because of that?
Really?
Yep.
Hey, I'm going to ask you, Ronnie, and then I'm going to let you guys have at it. My only question to Ronnie is, how did Minneapolis treat Willie when he played AAA ball there? Were there racial instances?
Yes, there were.
Really?
There were a lot of racial instances in Minneapolis at that time. He was a big star because he was so good with the Millers, but there was a lot of problems here. A lot of anti-Semitism also. Matter of fact, they had quotas for Jewish doctors weren't allowed to go into the hospitals. They had quotas at the University of Minnesota for Jewish doctors going into medical school. Matter of fact, a group of Jewish doctors started their own hospital called Mount Sinai Hospital for that reason, because they couldn't practice in the other hospitals. It was very, very racial and anti-Semitic. Hubert Humphrey was on the forefront. He was so generous and so liberal and so wonderful to the Jewish people, and he fought it all his life, you know. But it was very, very much so racial.
Didn't know that, and thank you for enlightening. Was Willie affected by it? Were there? Can you give me some examples of?
I really can't, because I don't think that he had it as bad as some others, because he was looked as a hero, you know, with the Millers.
Right.
The Millers were a very popular team at that time, and Willie was tremendous, you know. So I don't know what happened with him as far as housing or anything like that. That I have no idea about, but I'm sure he got a lot of flack too.
Okay, thank you.
But maybe not as much as some of the others that weren't heroes, you know, weren't renowned.
Okay. George.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, when you talk about Willie Mays in Minneapolis, you know, Willie did play in Trenton, New Jersey, on his way up to Minneapolis and then to New York. And you know, I think Willie only spent about 6 weeks in Trenton, but my understanding, I only know it from what I heard, was that he did not have a really wonderful experience in Trenton. You know, as a ball player, obviously he was well thought of, but where he lived was pretty much in an area where African Americans were living in Trenton. He was not living in an area where the other like the Italians in Chambersburg and that kind of thing. But Willie, apparently, from my understanding, did not have a real strong relationship with the citizens of Trenton, and I've heard that he really said that, you know, that's one place he would never like to go back to. So, you know, he's been pretty bitter the last few years of his life. He used to be a very outgoing, ebullient, you know, say hey kid and all that, but later in his later years, apparently he has
not just
become,
in his later years, in his middle years too. Willie.
Well, that could be, Ralph. I don't know. I've been a part of it. I mean, the fact that he was in New York and spent so much time, and then went to, you know, the with the West Coast, and then with you know, back to the Mets. So, but I only know what I've heard about Trenton, and it was not a really good experience for Willie.
Well, let me give you a brief history of Willie's bitterness and how that evolved. Number one, when he comes up, he had Leo DeRocher. When the Giants fired Leo DeRocher, or he moved on, or however it went down, Bill Rigney took over, and Rigney was not gonna nurse him like Leo did. And Willie was a pampered, spoiled little kid coming up at 20 and absolutely taken care of by the likes of Monty Irvin and Leo. They protected him. Boom. Leo's gone. Right about the time he's having trouble, he's having wife troubles. And his wife is really sticking it to him, his first wife. That, combined with moving to San Francisco, which they're a lot like Boston. A lot of Catholics, a lot of a lot of prejudice. You don't expect it in northern cities. You expect it in southern cities, but southern cities have overt prejudice. Northern cities like Boston, San Francisco, what have you, they have covert prejudice. Overt prejudice is much more offensive to humans than overt prejudice. Give me the guy who says, hey, I hate all Jews. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Then I know to keep away from him as being a Jew, as opposed to the guy who doesn't say that he hates all Jews, but hates all Jews covertly. Now, I digress. Willie suffered a lot. He couldn't buy a house in the nicest neighborhood in San Francisco. He grew very bitter about being here. It took the fans a long time because he was a New Yorker, and San Francisco it's a new franchise. They accepted Cepeda and then McCovey a lot faster than they accepted Willie.
That's because Willie came from New York.
Eventually came around as fans. In the meantime, the salaries, he was going through an era where by 73 he's gone, and in 74 there's free agency, and he sees guys making
that didn't actually happen until 76, Ralph. They had the Hunter case after 74, but the first free agency class was after 1976.
Okay, yeah. You're right, Al. But my point is, I was just.
Yeah, I know what your point is. Yeah.
This is what the combined thing with Willie, and then the Bonds, how the Bonds thing. He had his godson, and I'm not even talking about Barry. I'm talking about Bobby, how they treated him in baseball, how blacks were treated. He's got a right to be bitter in a way, but I feel sorry for him. He gave so much joy, and he doesn't experience joy in his life.
Yeah. Well, Major League Baseball gave him a hard time when he took that job as a greeter at one of the casinos.
Yeah, he and Mantle. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he and Mantle.
Right. The schmuck Bowie Kuhn fires him for being a greeter.
Right.
Yeah, him and Mantle. And the first thing that Tagliabue did when he took over, not Tagliabue, the Olympic Uberov took over was to undo that. Yeah.
That was disgraceful, and those guys were just public relations guys for baseball. Mantle was coaching first. Mays was, coming into the clubhouse once in a while. They're crazy. Baseball's always been unenlightened in so many ways, but.
Well, it's like that quote. Remember, I mentioned where baseball is a great game, except for the owners. Something to that effect, where the owners were.
Bill Terry said that.
The game is great despite the owners.
Yeah, Bill Terry was the originator of that quote. Also, I don't know how Bowie. When people were talking, or other people were talking about Selig being in the Hall of Fame. I said they lowered the bar with Bowie Kuhn.
Oh,
right.
They lowered the bar with a lot of them.
And Frick maybe also. Yeah.
Well, the one that comes to mind on a day when we're talking to Ronnie is Enos Slaughter. I thought Enos Slaughter was not a Hall of Famer, and the fact that he spiked Jackie intentionally.
Oh, he was terrible.
If you're gonna induct somebody on the borderline, you might try inducting somebody who wasn't a blatant racist.
Blatant racist, exactly. He sure was. Terrible.
Okay. George, you have several things to talk about today.
Well, yeah, I wanted to, we can certainly talk the racial thing for a long time, but I wanted to mention something a little related to business, and that is the fact that you've got the World Series with two major media markets, and I think Major League Baseball is probably very happy the fact that you got Boston and L.A. In the World Series versus Boston and Milwaukee. So, Ronnie, you might want to touch on that too, because the bills are being paid, and the fact that the ratings are huge. And I think the East Coast versus the West Coast is going to be a major factor in the popularity of the World Series this year.
Absolutely.
The old Lakers
Major League Baseball, not overtly, but they they were hoping for a L.A. Dodger Boston series. They were happy about that.
Well, you know what? The one thing that could really put the kibosh on the series is if there's a couple of rainouts and they run into November in Boston, outdoors in Boston, 30 degrees. That's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very good point, David, and that's sort of like the home field advantage because, the Dodgers are, playing out in L.A., they're going to come east and they're going to feel, really feel it. And New England in the wintertime, I mean, my cousin already sent me a photograph from her place up in Maine. They had 4 inches of snow the other day. So,
here
bad weather in Boston.
It's very windy right now.
Yeah, it's very possible that that's going to have a major impact on the series when it comes to the Dodgers, playing in that kind of atmosphere out in Boston.
Right. And they, you realize that in Milwaukee they have a retractable dome, a retractable roof,
right.
So they were covered up there.
Well, it also would have been warmer, much warmer, if they'd been playing it in Yankee Stadium. The temperature there is. There's a temperature line between New York and Boston.
I've seen games in the the late fall and in Yankee Stadium. I've never in the early spring. I've never been so cold. I mean, that is just brutal.
Well, you haven't tried sitting in Cleveland. You haven't tried sitting in Cleveland for opening day.
Stadium when it's cold, was cold and windy.
Wind coming off
do
the lake.
remember a few years ago?
Candlestick Park was
that
as cold and windy as anywhere in the country. It was absolutely frigid at times. They would, as a promotional thing, hand out little pins to anyone who stayed either a complete night, an extra inning night game. That's what it was.
Really?
They called them the Craw de Candlestick. It was an honor, a little plastic pin. I wish I'd have kept some of mine.
Well, I was at the opening day when the Nats moved into their new ballpark, and we had seats way up in the back, and of course behind it is the river, and it was just bitterly cold. It was March 30th or something around there. And it was just freezing. I hadn't been that cold at a ball game since I was in Cleveland for opening day. That's a tough one to sit through.
Yeah, Shea Stadium was brutal, especially when
Matter of fact, a couple of times.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, in Cleveland, they had a terrible snowstorm early in the season, and it lasted like all week. They were getting snow, and they moved the games that were supposed to be in Cleveland to Milwaukee, to the covered dome, to the retractable roof stadium. It was a few years ago, maybe 3, 4, not that many years ago, maybe 3 or 4. But they couldn't get the games in Cleveland, so they moved them to Milwaukee.
I wanted to raise an issue about we sort of got sidetracked a little because I was hoping someone would bring it up. But in last night's game, what in the world was Milwaukee thinking when they pulled their starting pitcher in the second inning? And they went to their best reliever for 3 innings? I mean, it was, and as even the announcers were saying, that's pretty stupid. They didn't say that so many words, but they shot their best bullet early on. I couldn't understand that.
It's overmanaged.
Even when they that couple of games in L.A., that one game in L.A. where Wiley started, he pitched to one batter and they took him out.
Yeah, right.
What kind of business was that? And it's goofy. It was just great. I think he overmanaged it.
Is that what we were talking about the other day when you were talking about, relievers and doing all this overmanaging?
Yes, George, and it certainly came to the fore last night.
Right.
Yeah. I
mean, that to me is absolutely crazy. I mean, if you're going to be a starting pitcher or opener or whatever they call it, I mean, my God, you got to be able to go past the second inning. That's crazy.
I don't understand why Roberts pulled the kid with 4 2/3 innings. He gave up the hit, so I mean,
yeah.
God.
Yeah. I think they also were thinking that to save him or
for what?
Pitching.
I mean,
it's the World Series.
Yeah, for
the
World
know.
Series, but it doesn't start till Tuesday, so there are a good few days off. I mean, can you imagine pulling a Koufax or a Whitey Ford out of the game in the second or third, a World Series game, the second or third inning? Insane.
Right.
I was
And
surprised they put in Kershaw.
Council had said before the game, he said, my main goal is to get him 5.
Yeah, right. He did. That's right.
Yeah. And then they brought
And it wasn't as if he was pitching badly. You know, he'd given up that
Hader,
2-run
they brought
home
that
run.
Hader in. They brought Hader in.
Hader, right.
Early. Yeah.
Way too early.
It was so goofy. Unbelievable.
I know.
And
I mean, he gave up a 2-run home run. That's all. It was 2-1.
Yeah. Right.
Hardly
And
insurmountable.
when he did this with Wiley in Los Angeles, he brought him in, he warmed up, and he opened up the game. He pitched to one batter, and they took him out.
Yeah.
So they could save him for a game in Milwaukee. It was crazy.
Hey guys, let me note something, if you don't mind. Both World Series teams have a number of versatile players who can play.
Yes.
Betts, they're moving in to play second base for the World Series. He's just an example. This Max, what's his last name? Bundy.
Muncy.
Plays all over. He plays all over the field.
Next month, yeah.
With this increased amount of pitchers on a roster, like 13, 14 guys, used to be 10 men on a roster, 10 pitching guys. They have had to go to bench players who have been versatile, who are versatile. And I think that really is one of the things about the game. I'm trying to stay positive about the ever-evolving, quote, or devolving game. It's being bastardized in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I'm trying to stay positive about the good things. Let me just finish.
Sure.
One
I'm
second
sorry.
now.
Yeah.
I just want to conclude by saying that the versatility of these players is not only to be commended, but I think it really adds to the overall play. What were you going to say, Al?
Well, one of the things that I mentioned this, I think I mentioned this to you, Ralph, when we talked yesterday. There was an article in the Daily News a couple of days ago where they talked to John Flaherty, who was a Yankee broadcaster and was a catcher in the major leagues for a number of years. And he maintains that the reason the catchers are having so many problems now is because every other inning they've got a new pitcher to adjust to.
Mm-hmm. That could be.
Yeah, and none of us Einsteins, including myself and many of my friends, ever thought about this.
The Dodgers are very well known for versatility on their players. It's unbelievable how many players they have that play all over the place.
Always were. I could think of Gilliam back in the days. Jackie Robinson played 4 or 5 positions. Gilliam.
Yes,
Hodges was a catcher when he came up originally.
Right. That's right. Yeah. But now in this team, it's like Hernandez played every position except catch. He even pitched once, Kiki Hernandez. And Bellinger, first base, outfield, just unbelievable. And it was very interesting how last night Roberts pulled Jock Peterson out of the game early and put in Taylor in left field. And that catch that he made, that unbelievable
that
catch
was a
that he
catch
made.
and a half. Holy shit.
Oh my God. That saved the Dodgers game. That was the winning ball. That was the bullet or what do they call it? The straw that broke the camel's back.
That was almost as good a catch as I've ever seen, if you think about it.
Yeah,
think
it
of
really
the circumstances.
Yeah.
That was terrific.
And he came up a second baseman.
Right.
Chris Taylor. Yeah. So
and
they're playing all over the place.
Can play right, can play with Boston, can play right, can play second.
Right.
The whole thing was that Mickey Stanley 50 years ago with the Tigers was moved from center field to shortstop so they could get Al Kaline into the lineup.
In 1968.
Yeah.
I think they have about 5 or 6 different players, maybe more, 7, 8, the Dodger team that are versatile, that can play all over the place. It's crazy. I think it's great. But, and say what you want about Puig, I love him. Puig, you
love him today, but you may not love him at the end of the World Series.
Right. He is a character, but he's brought a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
He's a 5-tool player when his head is on straight.
Well, that's every now and again it is on straight. Let's give him that, especially yesterday.
Wow.
So, George, anything else you wanted to cover today?
Well, I also wanted to talk about the ballparks themselves. Fenway Park is, notorious, with the Green Monster and Chavez Ravine. I mean, Dodger Stadium is pretty much standardized as far as the field dimensions. But I'm just curious, Ronnie and David and Alan and Ralph, what are your thoughts on playing at Fenway Park? Will they have to make some adjustments, the Dodgers, with their lineup, to take advantage of that short left field wall? It's something that is rather unique. I know that when my dad was playing, he loved to play at Fenway and had some of his better games because, he wasn't a home run hitter, but he was a good line drive hitter, and you get, balls hit off the walls and that kind of stuff. So you get a lot of doubles. And then, of course, the shortness of the left field wall, even though they put the bleachers on top, it's still a pretty good distance for guys that get right-handed power hitters. So I'm just curious what your opinion is of playing at Fenway Park. Anybody who wants to talk about it, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I can tell you one thing. I in an interview last night after the game with Puig, he said he's never played there, but his home runs are usually line drives. And he said, I don't know if I don't know if I can tower that wall, So there is going to be some adjustment they're going to have to make.
Yeah, line drive hitters at Fenway are in pretty good shape, but because you are going to get a lot of doubles. You're going to get balls that are going to hit off that Green Monster, but
hit off the wall, but not go over it.
Right. The guys with the power. I mean, they talk about left-handers and the fact that if Ted Williams had played at Yankee Stadium, he might have had twice as many home runs, and if DiMaggio had played at Fenway, he might have had twice as many home runs. So I mean, the dimensions of the ballpark certainly have something to do with playing the game and how it's played and how you juggle your lineup and that kind of thing. So I'm going to be curious to see what the Dodgers do, to compensate for that short Green Monster in left field at Fenway.
Oh, that's one of the great aspects of baseball that makes baseball unique is that the outfields are all different. Every other sport, the field of play is the same, 100 yards.
Right.
But in baseball, you have to contend with differences in every ballpark. It's great.
And that's why we all
remember a couple years ago
cutter ballparks that screwed it up for about 15 years.
Yes, right.
And now we're back to individual, unique ballparks.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what Kershaw can do because there aren't very many left-handed pitchers through history that have success there.
Right.
Good point.
Do you remember, even like you talk about ballparks, Houston a couple of years ago had, in their old ballpark, they had a elevated in center field. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was an incline. There was a little hill in the middle of center field. And I was always amazed me that how did these outfielders, aren't going to break their neck when they're looking up for a fly ball, and then they come to this incline.
Yeah, I think Shibe Park in Philadelphia had the same thing.
So can you mention that? Yeah, Ronnie, Crosley Field in Cincinnati had the same thing.
Field,
what they called the incline.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
It was very weird. And it always amazed me. I thought, my God, they're going to break their neck.
But it was sort of like an elevated warning track because you knew you were getting close to the wall when you went up the hill.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ralph was right. When they had the what I call the circles. You know, the Veterans Stadium and Three Rivers and all the rest of those. That the interest went down because they were all the same.
Shea was that way.
Yes.
Yeah, Shea was that way. But Shea had grass.
I remember talking to some ball players, I remember talking to some ball players about those cookie cutter stadiums. They say half the time they didn't know even where they were until they looked at the opposing team to see what uniform they were wearing. Because they were so, symmetrical. I mean, they were the round, and they called them cookie cutter multi-purpose stadiums for quite a few years. Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and Atlanta and
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. Yeah. Right. They were all that way. And Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh. I mean, they were almost identical. Even David did it right. Right. And David, as you'll recall, David, in Washington, I mean, RFK was very similar. The only difference was the roof line. The roof line was an undulated roof line.
Yes, it was.
Right. The exterior itself looked, if you're looking at them, they were almost absolutely 100% identical to each other.
Well, I got out onto the field at the Vet. That's when I did my interview with Pete Rose, and he was playing for Philadelphia at the time, and it was in the summer. And that artificial turf that they had there, it must have been 120 degrees on the grass. It was unbearable. I don't know how those guys stood out in the outfield between pitches, and I could barely keep myself from running out off the field. It was so hot underfoot. I've never felt had such a feeling before. It was terrible.
When we were out in St. Louis for the convention in 1992, when the circular Busch Stadium was operational, a bunch of us took a tour of the ballpark, and it was crazy because the infield was artificial, everything around home plate, and the outfield was grass. And I asked the tour guy, I says, how hot does it get down here? He said about 120. So I understand, Ronnie, what you were saying exactly. I felt the turf in Cincinnati one time, and it was like a pool table.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's true, too. The ball would just roll and roll and roll.
And also the infielders used to play deeper because the ball would rocket off the infield. So if you're playing on grass, it deadens the ball a little bit, but you're playing on turf. And the fact is, some of those infields were turf with just cutouts around the bases with dirt.
Yeah.
They would have to play. You'd see the second baseman or the shortstop. They were only almost playing in a short right field or short left field because the ball, moved so quickly when it hit off the ground in those stadiums. And the players themselves.
And how about the one-hop throw? The infielders would make one.
Well, they did. They had to get rid of the ball real quick, and absolutely. And also, I can remember watching ball players. They would take a baseball and they would just bounce it off the turf. I mean, you wouldn't do that on a grass field, but on AstroTurf, it was so hard that it would just bounce just like you were bouncing a tennis ball.
I remember when they first started coming into existence, I found it very difficult to watch games with the infield cutouts.
Right. Yeah, it was ugly. It
was very bad. Yeah.
Dodger Stadium infield was more like a clay, so that was very difficult. It was a little different than dirt, So the ball used to react differently. I don't know if it's still that way, but I'm trying to get tickets for the World Series in L.A. and I think I got them. I just sent a note to Dave St. Peter, who's the president of the Twins, this morning. And within 10 minutes, he wrote back to me. He said, my secretary will be calling you in the morning. Because I know each team gets World Series tickets, so hopefully I'm.
Hey, Ronnie, with all your connections, they should give you just front row box seat for crying out loud.
Yeah, from your mouth to God's ears.
They should give you a bat and spikes and let you play a couple of innings.
Well, I said to Ronnie on Facebook that when he goes to these schools, he should dress up in a Dodgers uniform like Happy Felton used to do on his pregame show.
Yes, you did.
What memories of Happy Felton? It was.
Yeah.
Ronnie, I want to ask you one thing.
As a Giant fan, those telecasts stand out to me as a kid more than the Giants telecast in my memory.
Oh yeah,
Ronnie.
Yeah.
Do you get upset every time you see a Dodger wearing number 14 or number 6?
Yes. Absolutely. Especially 14.
Yeah.
I think Kiki Hernandez is wearing 14.
Yeah, so because every time I see that, I think it's Gil Hodges, and every time I see a 6, I think it should be Carl Furillo, who I think was incredibly underrated.
Yep.
Yeah. I was always amazed that they never retired Gil Hodges' number for sure.
You know, that could be one of the reasons why he's not made it into the Hall of Fame. If the Dodgers didn't honor him, you know, some of these baseball writers might say, well, you know, why do it? Look at how many numbers the Yankees have retired.
Sure.
There's a precedent set there for retiring great ball players' numbers. I didn't even know that. I didn't realize that Hodges' number had not been retired.
Yeah.
The Yankees don't have any single-digit numbers left except for 0.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. When they retired Jeter last year, number 2.
That was the last one.
That was the last one.
Yeah.
Last one.
You know, this may seem a little esoteric, but I think that when number 14 comes out, whoever's wearing it for the Dodgers, it does honor Gil that some of us still think about Gil. So that it's a roundabout way, or still reminded of Gil by the 14. I thought it was ridiculous when Yogi and Dickey, when they first started retiring number, not ridiculous, but it was strange. 2 number 8s got retired for the Yankees.
That is strange. The first 3 the Dodgers retired were Roy Campanella, Jackie, and Sandy Koufax. They all got. They were the first 3. They had a ceremony.
I want my number 420 retired.
420.
That's all I ask. I'm a humble man.
420.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future with some of these pitchers' numbers, or even Judge 99, or Puig 66. I mean, these are strange numbers for baseball.
Yeah.
You know, they're guards in football.
Right.
Yeah, they used to assign those high numbers to the rookies or to the guys who were in the farm system. They wouldn't give them to the stars like they do today.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, certainly off the topic of baseball, but on the topic of high numbers, Dick Modulewski passed away.
Yes,
I saw that. Yeah.
Tackle with the old New York Giants.
Yeah, I think Greer is the only one left from that defensive line that's still alive. Because I know Pat Cabbage and Robert Stelly.
I'm trying to get an interview with Greer. I spoke to his wife. He wasn't very healthy, in good shape a couple of months ago, and she promised me that if I keep in touch when he recovers a little bit, when and if.
Well, these guys are in their mid-80s now. The ones that are still around are in their mid-80s.
Oh,
Whitey Ford is 90 today.
Yeah.
Really? Wow.
And Mickey Mantle would have been
a couple of years ago at the old Wednesday. He didn't. Ford didn't even come out onto the field. He just waved from the top of the dugout steps.
Yeah, from what I understand, he's not doing any signings anymore. Because people send him all sorts of junk to sign. And I read somewhere where he's not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
Because
I remember he'll be having a water gun fight with Billy Martin.
I remember years ago, I got this publication, Sports Collectors Digest, that when Billy Herman was terminal. He's a Hall of Famer. That the leeches, they were lining up to have him sign all sorts of crap right before the week or two before he passed away. So they could sell it.
What was Mickey Mantle's joke when he thought when he got to the gates of heaven he'd be greeted by St. Peter, and St. Peter would say, he'd ask St. Peter's, "Am I going to get in?" He says, "Yeah, Mick, but I've got a dozen baseballs for you to sign."
Yeah.
God.
Very cute.
And then you can get in.
You speak about number 6, like Carl Furillo. Steve Garvey wore the same numbers.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like when I see any Yankee wearing 17, 22, or 30, which are Rashy, Reynolds, and Lopat, I get upset.
And speaking of Venus Slaughter, I think he wore number
17 because he came to the Yankees right after Rashy was sold to the Cardinals. So they gave him number 17. And when Clemens was wearing 22.
Probably the same uniform.
Yeah, when Clemens was wearing 22, I couldn't watch it.
Yeah, now
that's how he Reynolds.
Uniform changes a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. How in the hell did they wear those wool uniforms? Those flannel uniforms?
Yes, horribly hot. Ooh.
Oh, God.
I can tell you guys for a fact that they were brutally hot, but they wore they wore 100% wool flannels, for decades, and ball players, they never complained about it. I mean, they were hot. I know a doubleheader sometimes you could lose 10, 15 pounds of water weight, but that's the way they were, and they were, until double knits came in, that's what ball players wore. And they were very hot.
Were they itchy, George?
Well, they were itchy. I mean, especially if you had allergic. I mean, some guys were allergic to wool, so they would itch like crazy. And then I've mentioned before that the ball players to stay cool. If they were playing out on defense, they would take a bucket of ice with cabbage leaves and they'd put it in their hats to try and stay cool. This was before air conditioning, and that's what they had to do.
Wow.
So I happen to have my dad's 100% wool flannel. I mean, I have it. It's an heirloom for me and for my family. But I thought to myself, I wore it one time to do a thing about Casey at the bat, and I had, I was wearing my dad's uniform, and I thought to myself, boy, this had to be brutal playing during the day in cities like Washington or Philly or Chicago or New York,
St. Louis,
St. Louis, with the heat and the humidity, and yet these guys were wearing those 100% wool flannel uniforms.
And most of the games were day games anyhow in those days.
They were all day games,
right?
Yeah.
Sure they were.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there were no artificial fibers, so they had nothing but flannel, and that's
that's right. It was
I remember Dizzy Dean say one time that when he was pitching for Houston in the Texas League, it was a million degrees down there, and the humidity is impossible. And he said he lost 15 pounds pitching one game during a doubleheader in that place.
Right.
Wow. Hey, the last guy to wear a flannel uniform in the big leagues was a guy named Ken Singleton. And they had switched to the artificial fibers that David just mentioned. And he was so violently allergic that they gave him a flannel uniform to wear. And he was the last.
But that was, of course, after the Mets traded him, because they didn't know that at that point. They traded him to the Expos, and when he was in Montreal, we found out that he couldn't wear the uniforms.
Yeah, so there you go. You got trivia. You got Al Blumkin knowing everything.
Not quite.
You are definitely our resident genius. You got David Hubler, whose memories are much appreciated. Thank you, gentlemen. And Ronnie, what can I say about Ronnie? You're in your heyday today. You're up in the captain's
Yeah, I am.
seat.
Ronnie, if you go out there, enjoy it.
I will. Thank you. Yes,
Remember,
thank you.
every 30 years, I hope the Dodgers win the pennant for you.
It's been a long time. Been a long time.
The deal is you've got to
years.
be around for the next 30 years, Ronnie.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right.
I don't know if I'll make that.
Well,
yeah.
we can all hope. Let's put it that way.
That's right.
George,
that's right.
Tremendous memories. I still see you. Let me ask you this. Do you, in the middle of the night, every now and again, do you go in and put on the flannel uniform and walk around the house with nothing else on but that flannel shirt?
Hey, I have it put away. I have it put away in an archival box, and you know, it's something that's very special to me. But you know, every time I look at it, when I do, I just think to myself, you know, what it was like to be a ball player, you know, playing back then in those uniforms. So,
hey,
totally different world.
Son of a ball
and you know,
player.
when you look at the uniforms today that the guys are wearing, you know, they're taking, you know, they're wearing a different jersey for batting practice, and then they're wearing different uniforms for special days and all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, the players today are really spoiled compared to what the players of yesteryear. I mean, they might have had a road uniform and a home uniform, and that was basically it. And after a game, they would clean them and they'd put them on the next day. So, you know, that's where, you know, in part of the, you know, the evolution
Would they
of
take their
baseball
uniforms
uniforms.
home to clean, or they were washed in the clubhouse?
Yeah, they had an equipment manager, and that was his job. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, the players would come into the clubhouse and they'd take their uniforms off, and they'd get them cleaned if necessary. Of course, it's, you know, some guys, if they hadn't been playing, but you know, I've seen uniforms full of dirt and blood and everything else. So I mean, they had to clean them for the next day.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you ever have to?
NBA,
you were playing,
players would take the uniforms back to the hotel and wash them out.
No
well,
kidding.
you know, it could be that they did that maybe in the early days, but I know when my dad was playing, I know that was always the job of the equipment manager. I mean, that he had to take care of the uniform, so you know that was part of what they did. But you know, they might have had one or two changes of uniforms. I know a lot of guys, you know, if they were really sweating a lot, they would change their sweatshirts and that kind of stuff, you know, during the games. But, you know, during the regular season, when they're out there playing, as we've talked, and you're in a city like the St. Louis's or Washington with a high humidity, you know, you're going to lose a lot of water weight, you know, when you're playing.
Yeah, well, the gray visiting uniforms came about because they would get dirt on them, and they were in visiting cities. I mean, this goes way back, so that they would show less dirt than the white home uniforms. So that's why they switched to, they had home and away, different colors.
Oh, that's very interesting.
That's very interesting.
It's a very interesting piece of trivia. And guys, I learned from two of you today from Ronnie and George about Willie's minor league experiences, and I'm shocked. I always pictured Minnesota as a liberal kind of state because it kind of tended to be after Hubert Humphrey.
Right.
But I'm most shocked about Trenton.
Right.
I'm thinking Trenton,
I was
Jersey.
surprised at that too. Yeah.
Very, very much so in Trenton. I can tell you for a fact. I mean, I live right across the river, and it used to be, you know, very segregated type of city. Now it's not, because it's home. Most of the Italian Americans or the whites have fled, and basically, like a lot of eastern cities, I mean, it's pretty much predominantly African American. But you know, Willie did have that experience in Trenton, and this was, you know, we were talking about 1950. So, you know, this was only, you know, with Ronnie, this was only a couple of years after Jackie. So, I mean, you know, it's the way the world was back then.
Well, I guess it's my built-in perceptions that sort of stuff didn't go on in the North, and that's a bunch of bullshit. It did.
That's a bunch of bullshit. If you think about Philadelphia and St. Louis and Cincinnati, what Jackie went through, they were all northern.
Well, I don't think of Cincinnati or St. Louis as being particularly north, but and Philadelphia either. Philadelphia, and you know the dynamics of Philadelphia, George, more than
Right.
than most of us. There's a lot of prejudice that went on in Jackie's time.
There certainly was, and that was the, that rap on, from the movie 42 with Ben Chapman. I mean, how he really went after Jackie with all kinds of racial slurs and epithets, and they had to try to make that picture with a photograph of Ben Chapman and Jackie holding a bat or something together. But
he
Jackie
had a shit-eating grin on. They forced him to smile.
Yeah,
no question.
That was disgusting.
Yep.
Yeah. And you know why they held the bat? Because Ben Chapman wouldn't shake Jackie's hand.
You're probably right about it. Ronnie, I hadn't even thought about that, but I think you're absolutely right about that. Yep.
They originally wanted a picture of the two of them shaking hands, and Chapman wouldn't do it. So Jackie grabbed the bat and said, well, we'll both hold the bat.
Okay. Gentlemen, I have to run. I will see you all or hear you all next week. It's been great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoyed it, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Great show, guys.
My pleasure. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.